aside, you know, the habit, and I even see it happening here tonight, and it's happening all over. Everybody wants to deal with the immediate crisis of the heroin issue that's going on. We have to deal with the immediate crisis of the heroin issue that's going on. But there is a big structural, societal issue that we have to be thinking about, which is drugs, it's alcohol, and it's mental health. These are things that are happening. Everybody in this room knows people who have either a drug, an alcohol, or mental health problem, and how it affected their families. And so, you know, they've all been stigmatized. Jeff talked about the shame that people don't want to admit what happened. You know, alcoholism, you know, it's always been around. You know, long before the heroin problem was, a lot of people destroying their families, ruining their lives because of alcoholism. And again, people in jail, 75% of people in jail have drug, alcohol, or mental health issue. We need to figure out how to talk about it as the disease that Jeff is talking about, that it's a real thing that happens in real families, and it's not, can't always be blamed on that the parents did something wrong, or something like that. Some people are just predisposed to be addictive personalities. And there's a lot of genetic stuff that goes along with it too. It's passed down from generation to generation. So we need to be able to talk about it as diseases, so it's not as stigmatized. We need to continue to do enforcement. But we also need to push towards this idea of prevention at earlier ages, using existing resources and focusing them more and more on prevention than on just the treatment and the emergency that happens later on. So Lisa, go ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, so good evening, everyone. I have a tendency to hear these types of meetings and think about them and think about the heaviness. So there's some heaviness in the room that I think is important to acknowledge, right? Just hearing about these issues, hearing about the deaths, the number of arrests that have happened in our county specifically, or Long Island wide, there's a heaviness to it. Just imagine how that translates to people who deal with issues and feel that they don't have much of a capacity or any capacity at all to cope. And oftentimes we see in the area of mental health, and I'll say I'm a social worker, there are a range of mental health professionals. We certainly have nurses, we have psychiatrists, we have mental health counselors, we have other types of practitioners, but specifically as a social worker, we're very much concerned with the idea of person and environment. So not just the person or the family that may be presenting with a particular issue, but what are some of the environmental causes? What are some of the factors that exist in the community, that exist in our society? So if you just think about that, person and environment, individual and society, we have to identify strategies, whether they're prevention strategies or intervention strategies, that go on both tracks, right? So really thinking about as the individuals suffer, mental health impacts so many people multiple different ways. And it is something where people do suffer in silence. We all know people within our families, people within our communities, our jobs, where they may have some issues. We're seeing that people are moving in some ways from the areas of it being so stigmatized to us talking in the field about wellness. How many of you have even heard of like a wellness promotion program on your job or in some organization that you might be affiliated with? We're talking more about wellness. And in thinking about the stigma of the language of mental health or mental illness, right, as opposed to moving toward language that could be more affirmative, like mental health promotion or emotional wellness or well-being. So it's important for us to really think about our language and how our language needs to shift as it relates to bringing to the fore some of the issues that people struggle with. But to the idea of how people suffer in silence, have difficulty coping with different stressors. We look at the stressors that exist in someone's life and the impact on their functioning. The stressors that I may have, you may have similar stressors, but we cope with them differently, right? And so for some people, you have to think of what's their capacity to cope and to function. What helps them to be resilient? Usually it's a strong family structure, some sense of belonging or connectedness, whether it's in the family structure or within an organization or within a church group or within a community. Sometimes it's people's faith. Sometimes it's confidence that was instilled in them from young ages, a capacity to really understand that they can do things, a motivation, a value system. So it's so important to have ambassadors of these types of messages from very early on. When our children are going to school, pre-K, I would say through 12. When we're pulling out resources that deal with substance abuse education and prevention, when they're in that assembly that Jeff talked about, 14 or however many kids in a large assembly room and an expert coming in to tell them why they shouldn't do what they do, in one ear, out there because the reinforcements aren't there the way they need to be, right? So really thinking about how do we shift the model, how do we bring smaller conversations, community conversations to come together. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration is a federal organization, SAMHSA, that has a lot of oversight as well as funding for certain programs. They started a model called Community Conversations on Mental Health, where they would encourage small groups to gather in their natural places like the VFW wall on a Thursday night to come together and talk about mental health, to talk about the stigma that exists, to talk about strategies that could be beneficial to open up access or pathways to treatment for people. Really struggling with these issues on a community level, or thinking about how wellness promotion programs can happen in formal settings and informal settings. Yes, it can happen in a mental health clinic. Yes, it can happen in a psychiatric unit in a hospital, but what can happen locally where people are doing the types of things that are going to foster a stronger sense of their own well-being? So yes, while we have several problems in looking at these issues, we also have to think of the intersectionality of these issues, how they compound on each other, how the issue that deals with maybe a young person having bad self-esteem, well, why? What wasn't in their life to give them a sense of affirmation? And if the balance between affirmation and invalidation doesn't quite get balanced for someone, that can be very difficult. Our kids are dealing with we had mean girls growing up when I was growing up, but these kids now are mean, right? You know, not all, yours are fine, but some of the others are just mean, right? Just for no reason almost, because they can, I guess. So the bullying, we're seeing an uprise on that. I have a client right now in my practice who's a junior in high school. I've been seeing her since she was in middle school, since she was an 8th grader, extreme cases of bullying. It just impacts her levels of anxiety and depression. I mean, and just, could be what's known as like girl drama, just girls just being mean girls. I don't want to just highlight girls. The boys do their version too, because then it's about what someone has the capacity to do. Heaven forbid the boy who doesn't have the physical dexterity of some others on the team, and then he gets pumped, right? And now he begins to feel less than. So again, that's that experience with invalidation. That's not balanced with some type of affirmation where you're doing well, where you can be resilient, who's giving you some support and some stronger sense of yourself. Then we see that can be very, very difficult and troubling. And that could lead to not just the mental health types of issues, but some experiences where they do feel a little better. Maybe at a pill party, right? Or some other way of connecting, or belonging to a group. And maybe that group is doing something that they shouldn't do by way of their behaviors, and it could be maladaptive, but in some way they feel a sense of connection. So as it relates to our children and young people, we really have to think about that idea. What spaces do we create in our communities and in society for them to feel a sense of connection? And not just in our families, but in schools. Sometimes it's clubs, sometimes it's music and drama, those types of things that they can do by way of activity. But we really have to look after who are the children that may not be connected. And how do we think about designing these types of programs or interventions for them? And how do we do it in a way that's responsible and respectful of their developmental process? Teenagers, it's all about their identity. Younger children, latency age kids, younger grades, it's all about their sense of competence. So we want to be able to use what we know as practitioners and researchers and scholars in the field to be able to say these types of activities should be informed by what we understand best practices to be, what we understand the research to help us to guide through some of these interventions. So in closing, I'll just say individual problems, absolutely. Societal problems, we could be here all night. We'd be past your 9:30 deadline, right? If we wanted to deal with some of those things and how it impacts us and the sense of hopelessness. I've spoken to so many people just in conversation that just feel that apathy that you mentioned in terms of potential voters and non-voters, but just a sense of, it's a heaviness that it's trying to bring out. Say again?
It's such a big thing, it seems like it's insurmountable.
Definitely. So just imagine if we feel that as it relates to some of these issues that we're bringing attention to tonight, when someone who's struggling, who doesn't have a sense of resiliency, who doesn't have certain supports, that sense of belonging, how that struggle just magnifies to now create that cycle of the issues that we're talking about tonight. So
thank you. Thank you very much. So, our natural tendency, again, is to focus on the heroin thing, this is the emergency thing, and young people, but this is not just young people, and it's not just heroin. Okay, we've got veterans that are coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a mental illness that's impacting them. It's got a physical and a mental component to it, and it's resulting in veterans committing suicide, and they're using drugs, and they're using alcohol to fill a hole in their soul. And that's, you know, it's kids that are disconnected, as we said, trying to fill this hole. So people are, we have to get away from the fact that, oh, those, you know, what's wrong with those people over there? This is happening everywhere. Okay? They say that 1 out of 5 people has some interaction with people with a mental health issue. Anxiety is much more common than we think it is. There's different levels of anxiety. Some people have mild anxiety, feel like very anxious, and they deal with it in different ways. So again, drugs and alcohol is often the way that people deal with it. But depression is very common among people that are in jail now. They came into jail in the first place, medicated with, self-medicated with drugs or alcohol, had a bad job experience, lost their job, committed crimes. So again, a lot of the dysfunction in society, I believe, people in jail, people who are not doing well in school, who end up not getting a job later on, all goes back to this drugs, alcohol, and mental health issues that we have. We have to figure out as a society, something I'd love to be able to help contribute to in Congress, on problems like an a very different issue, but is that we have to figure out what kind of global strategies can we deal with. You know, the people dealing with this on the ground, they're dealing with it on the ground every single day. But is there something we can do as a nation, as a society, to deal with these issues? One is to destigmatize these issues so that people talk about them more regularly. I know a lot of people, I was the best man with a guy, one of my best friends is alcoholic. You wouldn't believe the things this guy did. And now his son has died from drugs. And he talks about, I hit bottom so many times, this guy's sober now, and he's living a great life, except his son just died. Because he didn't have a chance to hit bottom multiple times. He did the drugs, and he died immediately. It was laced with fentanyl, also. And another friend is alcoholic. All right, so let's open it up to ask people, ask questions or make comments. And let's think about, you know, policy, what can we do to try and do it? You go first, you go second, third, and fourth. Go ahead.
I work in psychiatric hospital. The adults, and now I'm working with the children, medical records, and I will disclose.
Yeah, try to speak up so everybody can hear you.
The children's records that I am reviewing is totally shocking, and you failed to mention sexual abuse.
Right.
That has to be a combination of all the problems. It is rampant. And we talk about early intervention with children. These kids are victims. It's the parental issue that is causing the child problems. And it is really heavy stuff with the parents are the drug addicts, the alcoholics, sexual abuse. And how could a 12-year-old abuse a 5-year-old? What's going on in the homes happens to be outrageous. So, you know, it's not just early intervention for children, but what is happening with family structure and the dysfunctions that are in them.
So this woman, did everybody hear what she said? She works in psychiatric, as a psychiatric medical records. She sees these different files. She sees sexual abuse taking place in homes. She sees different types of abuse. She sees from parents to kids, from kids to kids, and it's a big problem that she's
along with the drugs.
Along
and
with
the mental.
So, you know, one of the things that I'm very fixated on, based upon what I did as county executive with our No Wrong Door program, is that, you know, we spend all this money and time on people when they're in this emergency situation where it's like, you know, you can't not do it, but it's become such an emergency. We have to figure out how to get there early. So schools are where you have a captive audience, and teachers see children with problems. They see something happening in that child's life. The problem is that the schools will never have the resources to deal with these problems, because the highest wealth school district and the lowest wealth school district with the lower risk and the higher risk kids, they still all have the same, you know, they would argue that the lower risk school districts have less resources, but they have the same resources as far as one school psychologist, one guidance counselor, and one social worker in each building. Okay? Except the problems in the high-risk school district is that 70% of the kids are facing a problem. And in the wealthier school district, 15% of the kids are facing the problem, and they may have private health insurance on top of it, and they've got family to help deal with the problems as well on top of it. Here, you're dealing with this huge volume of problems. Now, nobody wants to spend more money. There's not more money out there to go out and say, oh, we're going to give you 5 guidance counselors, we're going to give you 5 social workers, we're going to give you 5 school psychologists. That probably wouldn't be enough either. We have to figure out how to take all the existing resources that we have in society in our many not-for-profit agencies and government programs and get them into the schools where the kids, the teachers can identify them. They can't treat the problem themselves, but bring the resources in to help those kids at those young ages. So, you were going to go second, Darryl.
Yeah, so, and as a teacher, I can speak a little to that. But first, I want to commend the panel. I want to thank you for coming out and sharing your wisdom, your insight, and your experience. I'm a little familiar with both of you. I know Jeff very well, and you know, I'm inspired by the work that Jeff does, and grateful for what he does. And Tom, I've supported Tom from the very beginning, and in part, he's allowed me to vent about a number of things. And one of the things that I've vented to him about is this particular issue. And Tom and I share a similar pain. He's lost a sibling, I lost a sibling for different reasons, but we know what it's like to have lost a sibling. And he has been affected by this, as he's shared. And so that has meant a lot to me, because not only does he obviously have a knowledge of these issues, and he has a vision, but he cares. And that means a lot to me, because I hear a lot of politicians, they'll say all the right things, but I don't necessarily get the feeling that they care. And I really believe that Tom cares. And, you know, in terms of who I am somebody who's been personally affected by this in many, many different ways, okay? I'm a teacher, as I said, but I took a leave of absence and I enlisted in the Navy, and I deployed to Afghanistan, okay? And as I was talking to Al before, Al was a World War II veteran, and this is something we were discussing. In Afghanistan, one of our missions was the confiscation of poppy. Afghanistan produces over 90% of the world's heroin. So while I was over in Afghanistan, taking part in that mission, a student of mine died of a heroin overdose, and my brother started using heroin. And when I came back from the war, Tom mentioned the veterans, a lot of my friends and I had difficulty processing our experiences in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, the way we handled it in the culture of the Marine Corps was we drank. That's how we handled it, we drank. You know, you work hard and you drink, you don't talk about your emotions. You have that part of it, but then you also have the other extreme where, you know, PTSD is being diagnosed so often that that's another part of the problem. But I won't digress and get into that. But when we came back from the war, that's how we handled it. And in the midst of all of that, me trying to process my experiences in the war, a couple months later, I got that terrible phone call that Jeff was talking about, and my brother had died. And not from heroin. My brother died from overdose of Xanax and Suboxone, legally prescribed medications. Most of the people that are dying in this country of overdoses are dying from legally prescribed medications. And Suffolk County right now has a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma, which is one of the pharmaceutical corporations that produces Oxycontin. All right, and that's significant. I'm going to come back to that. But these are the two main points that I want to make. I hear a lot of talk about teachers and education and prevention. Well, I am a teacher. And I can tell you right now that in Afghanistan, I was on the front lines, and as a teacher, I'm on the front lines. And I always knew that when we were in Afghanistan and somebody who was making decisions that was not on the front lines, that's when people got killed. And it's the same thing in the classroom. We are in the front lines, we're in the trenches, and people who are not in the classroom are dictating what we need to do. That's part of the problem with Common Core. The other part of the problem with Common Core is not just this culture of testing that creates this terrible stress that then often leads to kids self-medicating. The other part of the problem with Common Core is that teachers were not part of the conversation to create Common Core. So what I think we need to have happen is we need to create a preventative substance abuse curriculum, K through 12. And there's a lot of programs out there that exist that do that. They do that, but here's the problem. Teachers were not involved in creating these programs. So what I'm doing at the high school that I teach at is I'm involving teachers in the conversation. I know that this is an important issue because I've been personally affected by it. But I know that not all of my colleagues might see that. So next week I'm offering a professional development for my entire department, the social studies department, and I'm going to teach them a lesson on the opioid epidemic. And most of my department has committed to doing this. Once we do that PD, a couple weeks later, when we do this recovery awareness prevention week at the high school, all of the social studies teachers are going to teach that class at our high school. And next week, one of the other teachers I teach with, Tammy Walsh, she's a math teacher. She's teaching a lesson on substance abuse using math and statistics. Commissioner Singh is going to be at the school observing it. So the issue is we've got to get teachers involved in the conversation. We've got to create this program that starts in kindergarten and works its way all the way up to 12th grade. Because while I agree with PJ to an extent, this is something that does have a life expectancy and will probably die out. But I just can't entirely accept that because we're going to lose more people and we need to take action. And I know that you believe that we have to take action, but I believe part of that action has to be in the schools and it's got to be K through 12. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of some of the other things that you alluded to earlier, Tom, when we think about this lawsuit with Purdue Pharma, and in 2006 or 2007, there was another lawsuit against Purdue Pharma where they admitted that they were misleading about their product being addictive. Okay, and I think $600 million came out of that lawsuit, and they admitted that they were wrong. That's a lot of money. So what I would like to see maybe is Purdue Pharma, and Tom's right, it's not necessarily that we need more money and more resources. We have plenty of that. But maybe what I would like to see Purdue Pharma do is allocate some of their resources, since they're making billions and billions of dollars and they're part of the problem. And I'm not saying that all medication is bad, but maybe they could be part of the solution and they can help us in creating this curriculum and getting kids involved. I've got a student right there, Michael, and he's a student and he's here. You know, the kids care. So, you know, I don't want to keep going. Obviously, this is something that's very important to me, but I'm telling you, education is key. Getting teachers involved, creating a K-12 program that teachers are part of, and doing it at a local level. That's very, very important.
Thank you, Darryl. That was very good.
You said the heroin epidemic started in Afghanistan. How much?
Well, Afghanistan produces over 90% of the world's heroin.
Probably